What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fann of showmefootball.com, covering your Kansas City Chiefs. He's Michael D'Arcy of KC Sports Report, and the Kansas City Chiefs just handed out a major extension to defensive end George Karlaftis. Michael and I are going to react right after this. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back into another video on my channel. We are live streaming this, actually, for those of you tuning in just now. Decided we'd go live for this, kind of do a little bit of like a breaking news sort of segment here. But Michael, the Kansas City Chiefs just signed defensive end George Karlaftis to a 4-year, $93 million extension. Got the official report from Adam Schefter. Chiefs in 2022 first-round pick George Karlaftis reached an agreement today on a 4-year, $93 million contract extension that includes $62 million guaranteed. Karlaftis posted 24.5 sacks during his first 3 seasons in Kansas City, and now will continue as a focal point of the Chiefs defense. So, Michael, I wanted to go live for this because I have some pretty strong thoughts on this, and this is kind of something that we spoke about briefly in some previous videos. But now that it's actually happened, I'm going to let you go first. What was your initial reaction to the Chiefs extending Karlaftis at the number that they did?
Well, my first reaction to the signing is I was like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, I just put up a video with my guy Kyle Collier talking about a potential George Karlaftis extension. We were talking about the report from Ricky Scoops on Twitter. Well, guess what? Ricky scooped again. It worked. But yeah, I was kind of like, okay, like really? Now I got to spend more time because he just got signed. And so, we're back here on this live stream. But my first thought was they gave him how much money? And I wasn't the biggest advocate of paying George Karlaftis $100 million. And the Chiefs went out in an offseason where they'd already signed Trey Smith to a giant contract extension where they have to sign Trent McDuffie. And they gave George Karlaftis a solid edge rusher, not a great one, and they paid him great money. He is currently the 10th highest paid defensive end, and I think that we both agree he is not the 10th best edge rusher in football.
No, quite honestly, he's not even close. And I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say with, I don't dislike George Karlaftis, and he's a good player. And I'm not even mad that they extended him. Like, do I disagree with the number? Yeah, absolutely. But this isn't something where I'm losing sleep at night going, I can't believe the Chiefs paid this much to George Karlaftis. Like, it's not that bad. But I will say this. I've been firm on this for a while and for years, and I've gotten a lot of crap from Chiefs fans, probably that are going to be watching this. They say, you hate George Karlaftis. I don't hate him, but the Chiefs treat him like a number 1, and really he's a number 2 defensive end at best. And like you said, Michael, they paid a good player. George Karlaftis is a good player. They paid him great money. This is the kind of money you pay to a guy that you think can be like Trey Hendrickson. And Trey Hendrickson's a good comparison. Now, I know he's kind of wanting a new deal right now, but as of right now, he's making $21 million per year on his current deal. The Chiefs just paid George Karlaftis more than that. Does George Karlaftis come even close to Trey Hendrickson? No. The Chiefs are betting that he'll improve, and it's the same kind of logic that, we explained with the Trey Smith extension. It's like, he may not be worth this right now, but we're paying him based on what we think he's going to do, and there's a chance that you could have taken this to next offseason, and maybe he gets even more expensive. And I totally understand that. I get it. Maybe the Chiefs feel like they're getting a deal on Karlaftis right now. But the way I see it, today, the moment that this contract is signed, the Chiefs paid a good player great money. And Michael, you put your video out a little bit before Karlaftis got
20
extended.
minutes before, by the way, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and your guest, Kyle, I mean, shout out Kyle, very level-headed dude. I mean, I agree with him on a lot of points, and I agree with everything he had to say in your video that you guys did. And he was basically saying, if you pay this kind of money to George Karlaftis, I'm expecting double-digit sacks per year. Karlaftis is not a double-digit sacks per year guy right now. Hopefully he can get there, and if he does, it'll make the contract look better. But, Michael, I'm looking at his stats right now. 8 sacks, 10 sacks, 6 sacks. I just don't see a guy that's worth $23 million per year. If this was $16, $17 million per year, I might be on here saying right now, I like this. This is a good value deal. Not at $23 million per year, though. I'm not seeing it. And also, and your guest also brought this up, and I've been pounding this drum for years now, Karlaftis is a bottom feeder in this league when it comes to pass rush win rate. His pass rush win rate is not very good. And I pointed this out on Twitter. But the Chiefs now, with this extension, are paying a combined $31 million per year for the starting duo of George Karlaftis and Mike Dana, because make no mistake, Mike Dana plays starting snaps for this defense. Those guys both rank in the bottom third in the NFL among starters in pass rush win rate. It's just not good enough. It's not cutting it. And you're paying a lot of money for not very good. And I saw, my guy Adam Best over at Arrowhead Addicts say this. The Chiefs are making an investment into Chris Jones here by, securing someone that's helpful to him. And I'm sitting here going like, I don't really think Karlaftis helps Chris Jones. I think Chris Jones helps Karlaftis, but this isn't a guy that's really taking that. And someone replied to him and they were like, George Karlaftis or elite tackles don't really struggle with George Karlaftis. And it's hard to disagree. They don't. Like, this isn't a guy that's a massive threat, a speed rusher who's like winning again in the first 2 seconds of the play. I've always said that. And he had a strong end to his season last year in the postseason, but we talked about that too, Michael. Like, it's a little bit Frank Clark-ish where, he's just kind of feeding off the gravity of Chris Jones. But how much of it is he really doing it himself? This contract to me, Michael, is the Chris Jones effect. Chris Jones gets another guy paid that makes him look a lot better than he is if he were to go and sign with the Tennessee Titans instead, if he were a free agent. And again, Karlaftis is a good player. I don't dislike him, but, the Chiefs, I think, went against what a lot of people would have done here, or like the value they would have, given him. And I know, Michael, you pointed out, I think his market value was like $22 million per year.
Yeah.
And I get it, man, but to me, it just feels like a tad bit of an overpay. And something else that your guest said, and I did want to talk about this too. He said that, the fact that George Karlaftis isn't a Trey Hendrickson, that his pass rush win rate isn't very good. Those were things that the Chiefs were going to use against him in negotiations. And that's the one point I disagree on, because you know what? If they were going to use that against him in negotiations, he wouldn't have gotten this contract. And I think he gave the Chiefs front office a little bit too much credit. I think they love George Karlaftis. I think they think he's a number one. But I don't think he's a number one.
I think more than anything, we talk about, Chris Jones got George Karlaftis paid. I think Steve Spagnuolo got George Karlaftis paid. Like,
definitely had a hand
he is just a guy that loves his players, and his players love playing for him. But Josh, I mean, they did overpay. I don't care what anybody says. They did not need to give George Karlaftis, what was it, $24 million a season, $23 million a season?
23, yeah.
That's something, I think it's 23 and a half or something like that. But
yeah. That's
something that, if the Chiefs struggle, that you're going to look at that contract and be like, was that really necessary? Was it necessary to pay a guy $23.5 million for 8 sacks? Like, you might as well go out and pay 3 different guys a combined total of that. And then you've got not only more, security in case somebody gets injured, because if George Karlaftis gets injured, I mean, you're screwed. And this edge rusher room isn't that great. And if you're going to give, like, the Chiefs had the opportunity to go out and pay Charles Omenihu, give him like a 2-year deal. They didn't do that. They gave him a 1-year deal. And I think it just shows you how they value certain players a lot more than they value other players. And I do think it's interesting that we get this right before camp starts. They did not, there was not really much of a negotiation. It was like, okay, we want George Karlaftis. You want to be here? And George Karlaftis is like, yeah, I'll sign that right now.
Well, let's point out one of the good things about this extension. Now that they got this out of the way, it clears the path for Trent McDuffie. Now, I don't know if the Chiefs will extend Trent McDuffie. I don't know if they'll do it before the season. But this at least is one less thing on Brett Veach's plate. And now Trent McDuffie is the focus, right? And now that they have the Karlaftis deal figured out, they know how much money he's going to make. They know how long he's on the books for. They can kind of work around that. They know how much he's going to get paid. It doesn't complicate Trent McDuffie. It's not like, okay, we haven't paid George yet. How do we keep both of these guys? It's now you paid George. Now you figure out how to pay McDuffie. And that's the good thing about it.
And I think that the more that time goes on, and again, I'm not an expert in the salary cap, but Trent McDuffie is going to want $100+ million, and he's deserving of that. And again, even if they pay Trent McDuffie, Josh, somebody's going to be the odd man out. I don't know who it's going to be. It might be a guy. It might be a guy like Ashton Gelati who ends up being, let's say he's really good. In 3 years or 4 years when he's up for an extension, where's that money going to come from?
Or like a Rashee Rice who's maybe, due after this year. Like,
I'll tell you what, with all the stuff going on, I would go right to his jail cell and be like, hey, you want to sign this? You want to sign
Well,
this?
that's kind of what I said. That's kind of what I said, and I wanted to talk about that actually when we had Lucas on, but it escaped my mind. But I would almost kind of go to him right now and be like, hey, you want to keep you around here? You've had some things happen. Get him at a discount, right? Kind of like that first Tyreek Hill extension. Mm-hmm. Tyreek Hill could have gotten more, but he had the whole, off the field stuff in the background going on. The Chiefs were like, we want to keep you. We're giving you this deal because we stuck by your side. But because you've had these off the field things, it's going to be a little bit less. And they're like, yeah,
Josh,
okay.
he's dealt with so much legal stuff in the civil side. That $1 million that he has to pay, like, Josh, he just doesn't have all this money. And if the Chiefs went to Rashee Rice and was like, hey, we want you back. Let's do a 3-year deal, a 3-year extension, guarantee him a bunch of front-loaded money, a bunch of money. You could get him on a lower guarantee, and I think he'd sign it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, reeling it back into George Karlaftis, though, another thing that I thought about. So I think there's a solid chance that Chris Jones maybe retires by the time we get to the end of this Karlaftis deal, okay? And I just look at it and say, is this the kind of guy that can headline your pass rush after Chris Jones is gone and, like, you can build a good defense around it?
It's funny that you mentioned that. Oh, really quickly. Ahead. I was going to say, I was like, if Chris Jones retired tomorrow, you got to trade for a number 1.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of where I was going to go with that. I mean, I just don't, they paid him like a number 1 with this deal. Okay. They did. And I don't see him as a number 1. If Chris Jones, like you said, retired tomorrow, I just don't think this defensive line is it. I just don't think there's enough on it.
Well, it's because you've got a lot of role player guys like Charles Omenihu and, Mike Dana. Mike Dana is a definition of a guy that you didn't need to pay. Like that was a worthless deal because he's not someone that's going to give you more than 5 sacks a season. And you're telling me right now that if the Chiefs invested, a first-round draft pick, second-round draft pick on an edge rusher that wasn't, Felix, I think that they'd probably hit on that.
I think you can find another George Karlaftis in the draft pretty easily. And I always kind of use that method to determine, whether it's worth it or not to like really pay big money for a guy. Could you find this guy again in the draft? When it came to like the Chris Jones negotiations, it's like, no, you're not finding another Chris Jones. I know some people are going to say, well, Josh, they drafted Chris Jones. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I understand what you're saying. But like realistically, if you were to have a draft, 100 times, how many times in those 100 drafts could you find a player the caliber of Chris Jones? And I just don't think it's very many. I think there's a George Karlaftis available in just about every single draft.
Yeah, I mean, he's not putting up more than double-digit sacks. He's giving you 6, 8, and that's good.
And I do think he'll have a few years where he gets like 10, 12, 13,
but he doesn't have the upside of like a 17, 18.
Right, he's not a Trey Hendrickson, and he just got paid like he's a Trey Hendrickson.
Now, I will say Trey Hendrickson wasn't Trey Hendrickson before he came into that because like when he was in New Orleans, he was all right, but then he really took that next step. So maybe they are,
and that's
so
what the Chiefs are hoping for, right? That's what they're hoping for with this deal. I just don't see that kind of ceiling for him, though. I really don't. His pass rush win rate just doesn't justify the deal. And I did want to talk about this too as well, and then we can kind of wrap things up. But, you know, I think George Karlaftis, I feel like I'm going to be saying this like 100 times now. He's a good player. Obviously, he's a good player. Not upset at all at the Chiefs extending him. And of course, like I said earlier, it kind of clears the path for McDuffie. You have nothing else on your plate. But man, it's just like I need to see him take over some games with this deal. He needs to have a few games next year where it's like, oh wow, like Karlaftis just blew by that dude, and that just doesn't happen. Go ahead.
He had a couple. He had a really good playoff run.
He did.
And honestly, I mean, to bring it back to Frank Clark, that's why honestly this deal kind of scares me, because the Chiefs gave Frank Clark all that money and he was Mr. Non-existent, and then he, I know how you feel about Frank Clark in the playoffs.
This is me being honest. I think Frank Clark was kind of lazy, and he definitely coasted in the regular season. And what I will say about George is I don't see him doing that. Like, George is a hard worker. He's an energy effort guy. Like, I don't see him falling off to the levels of Frank Clark.
No. And you know what? It takes a while for defensive ends to develop. Now, I don't think it takes 3 years necessarily, but like, if you usually look at Mike Dana,
I think you know pretty early on when you have a guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's not a guy, but he could be I think he could be a really solid player. And I think the issue is that if the Chiefs get into this cap management game and you're looking at George Karlaftis, and let's just say he ends up being, a better Mike Dana, you're going to look at that contract and be like, I mean, yeah, it's great that he's on the team, but like not at that price.
I just don't like how, because we were talking about this off the air, but you have a lot of Chiefs fans. I think that if we had told them a week ago, hey, George Karlaftis, $23 million per year, they would have been like, nah, it's too much. And I agree, right? We were talking about that with Lucas. Like, I think if this deal was $17, $18 million per year, we're all for it, man.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's $23 million, it's like all of a sudden a lot of these Chiefs fans I see on Twitter like are running cover for the front office and Brett Veach. And I don't want to make it seem like I hate the deal. I don't hate it, but it's like, do you guys? I just sometimes, Michael. Here's how I'll put it. I feel like sometimes that if the Chiefs signed Sky Moore tomorrow to a 3-year, $30 million extension, there would be Chiefs fans trying to positively spin it. Like, I genuinely believe that, even though there would be no reason for that, no reason to justify extending Sky Moore, there would be someone out there that's like, oh, but the market's kind of getting heavy. And it's like, no. And they did this with Karlaftis. I've already noticed it on social media. They would have agreed a week ago that $23 million per year was an overpay. And now that the deal's been signed and now that it's happened, all of a sudden I see people going, well, the market was rising. This deal kind of had to happen. And it's like, no, let's call a spade a spade. They paid a good player great money. And it's just, we don't have to sugarcoat it.
Or even if they didn't pay a good player great money, they definitely overpaid based on his market value. His market value was $22.2 million a year. They gave him 23.5.
And I think a lot of those market values a lot of times are real generous. Because I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, like they had Mike Dana making 17 mil per. It's like, no way. He didn't even get close to that.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely overpaid him. And I think they probably overpaid Nick Bolton too. But that's just kind of what happens when
Spags effect.
Yeah, that's that Spags effect. And it's going to work until it doesn't. And I know that's terrible analysis, but like it's going to work until it doesn't. And I said this to you in the before the show started. These are the type of contracts that can kill dynasties. And I hate to say that. And I'm not saying the Chiefs dynasty's over.
Right. Like we're not saying it's doomsday, guys. We're not saying that at all.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. But I do think like you can't afford to do this 1 to 2 more times. Like, and that's the thing, like someone's going to pay for this George Karlaftis deal. Whether it is a rookie, whether it's Rashee Rice, maybe it's Xavier Worthy. Maybe Xavier Worthy's not going to get a contract because, you gave George Karlaftis all this money. And I think that, there's always a domino effect. And I'm worried to see what the domino effect is going to be after you paid the interior offensive line all this money. You made Trey Smith the highest paid guard in NFL history. He's not the best guard in football. Like the right guard, he's not even the best right guard in football. And, talk about a situation where Chiefs fans bend over backwards a little bit. And I as an optimist, I tried to, make it seem like, okay, like I get why the Chiefs did this, but like they did kind of give Trey Smith a lot of money too. And you haven't even paid Trent McDuffie yet, who I think could get $120 million. If you gave him 120 over 5, I think that's probably a really solid.
Well, and if I'm McDuffie and his agent, I'm saying, hey,
3.
You kind of just gave these two guys more than really what they were worth. So what do I get if I am worth it?
Well, I see people on Twitter saying like, oh, like the cornerback market's kind of set. Like, yeah, until someone fucking breaks it. Like that's the thing. Like everything's set until someone comes along. You see what TJ Watt got paid a week ago.
Yeah.
He got 41 per. Like, I'm not saying Trent McDuffie's going to get that kind of money, but
yeah,
if Trent McDuffie comes out and is like, I want $28 million a season, and then a team's like, let's be in the middle at 26, like, again, that's over $100 million. He's going to get overpaid.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of hard to overpay McDuffie, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
I know I said we were going to wrap it up a minute ago. I do want to say, though, with this deal now, I think it's imperative that Omar Norman Lott and Ashton Gelati hit as draft picks. You're just going to need more. And with this deal, I don't see in the next couple off seasons the Chiefs going out and paying another edge rusher, right? So the guys that you have on this roster now that you've invested in over the past couple years, it's time for them to step up.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Again, going back to it, if Omar Norman Lott or Ashton Gelati does hit, how are the Chiefs going to pay him?
Well, by then we'll be at the end of Karlaftis' deal, but it's all going to depend on, one, how those guys perform, and two, like what the cap looks like then.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it'll necessarily affect those guys because they just came in, but I think, you brought up a good one, Worthy. Like, what does his negotiations look like in a couple of years? Because eventually these big contracts do lead to you having to say goodbye to someone.
Yeah.
The Chiefs had to do it with Tyreek Hill after they paid Joe Tooney and after they paid whoever else it was that was due up back then. Their name is escaping me at the moment. But it's like, eventually you do have to say goodbye to a player that you like.
Well, I think that Brett Veach has had a few draft classes where they're almost taking some bigger swings and seeing if, like, okay, is this player going to hit, or we'll take this guy as a developmental piece because we think that he could turn it. You can't do that anymore. Like, we're getting to the point where, George Karlaftis is now on his second contract. That 2022 draft class, Leo Chenal, are you going to pay him? Like,
yeah,
you've got to draft extremely well. And the Chiefs are going to have 2 or 3 guys from this past class hit. And if it doesn't, it's going to set them back. And then that's going to put even more pressure going into next year's draft. And so, hopefully some of those guys do end up working out, because if they don't, that's when these contracts get scary. Because it's one thing if you pay all these guys, but you're drafting, the George Karlaftises and the Trent McDuffies and the Trey Smiths. And so you can kind of figure out, which guys you want to let go, because you feel confident in, like, Jaden Hicks is a perfect example. You feel confident in your 4th round draft pick in Jaden Hicks taking over as your starting safety. Now, if he ends up being horrible, that's where it hurts.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs, a few years ago when they lost in the Super Bowl and then they followed it up with a loss in the AFC Championship game to the Bengals, it was kind of like, I think we're feeling the effects of that 2018 draft where they just didn't hit on like a single pick, or the only one they hit on was Derek Nottie. And it's like, if you don't draft well and you're handing out bad contracts, you have to pay the sins of, either handing out bad contracts or previous, poor draft picks. And hopefully that's not a situation we run into, because the Chiefs have drafted well as of recently. They've gotten some big hits in the draft. Now they need to keep that up, though, for sure.
Yeah, and that's just whether or not they paid George Karlaftis, they're going to have to draft well just to keep this dynasty going and giving Patrick.
Well, you mentioned Leo Chenal, and it's like, he a loss. If they can't pay him and they lose him, well, then you need to hit on Jeffrey Bassa, right? Like, that pick needs to pan out. It's just you got to keep the reinforcements coming, and that's how you continue the dynasty. And I think
and paying, like, I mean, not to completely blow this, but like maybe go try to pay Leo Chenal too, because he's not going to be someone that if you go to him right now, he's going to get Mike Dana money.
Well, you pay him early because that's kind of the mistake the Chiefs have made, a lot recently. Like they're waiting until the 11th hour to pay some of these guys before deadlines and that sort of thing. And after everyone else makes their money too. And it's like, if you had paid this guy a while ago, you could have gotten him for 80 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes it's not totally in their control because, sometimes an agent will say, we're going to wait to sign. We want to see how much, like if you're McDuffie's agent, you say, we're going to wait and see how much Sauce Gardner gets before we sign anything. We're going to wait and see how much Surtain gets before we sign anything. And maybe that's what's happening. But, now that those guys have gotten paid, potentially McDuffie is more expensive than he would have been if you had signed him last offseason or extended him last offseason, But
because that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised even if Trent McDuffie's not better than Pat Surtain. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting paid more. That's just how the cornerback market works. And that's just how NFL markets work. Like everyone wants to be the highest paid. And the Chiefs have to draw a line in the sand to be willing to walk away if it ends up being too expensive. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that, but if you're Brett Veach, you've never invested in corner. I mean, the only investment that you made was Trent McDuffie, and look how well it worked,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see the ripple effect from this George Karlaftis extension, but no, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there, guys, and we'll ask the question to you. What are your thoughts on the George Karlaftis extension? Do you think this was a smart move, or do you think they overpaid maybe a little bit? Michael and I have been pretty clear in where we stand. Definitely want to hear from you guys down in the comments below, though. With all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Some more Chiefs fans can find us. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com. Follow me on Twitter at showmefb. And then before we go, Michael, where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report, and that's about it.
There you guys have it. That's all going to be in the description down below, as always. That's all we got for this one. We'll see you all in the next one. And as always, go Chiefs.